Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. Today's date is May 6, 2020, and this is a video about the coronavirus and Trump and the very real serious deficits in the government's response to the coronavirus in the U.S. Actually, the same thing could be said for the U.K., which has the highest death toll in Europe, I believe, right now, and the U.S. having the highest death toll in the world. So I think it's worth pausing here for a moment because I think that we're so used to just how right-wing, those of us who are politically aware, how right-wing the U.S. government is that we can get desensitized sometimes to, well, of course they did that, or you find this surprising, or whatever. But personally, for whatever reason, I woke up this morning thinking about how mad I am. Actually, really pointedly mad about the government's coronavirus response and all the right-wing Koch brothers funded disinformation that is prompting the reopen protests, which are like more white supremacist terrorism, basically. Actually, I think I know where it came from. Why I woke up so mad in particular was because I was interacting with some people, not in political groups, but just in other groups on Facebook. And there was a kind of disturbingly high amount of people saying, oh, it's the plandemic and they're just trying to scare us. Like, who is they? Who is they? It doesn't even make sense. Okay. There's a conspiracy here. It is the class interest of the 1%. And yeah, they do act in what you could call a conspiratorial way sometimes, like a nefarious planned group activity to defend their class interests. In this case, they want to reopen the stock market and get more profits. It's not to prevent Karen from getting a haircut. It's they want to sacrifice workers, basically die for the Dow, die for Wall Street. So I have a couple of videos here. Like I said, I woke up thinking about this and just pissed because people's kids are in danger. People's elderly parents and relatives are in danger. This is a horrible situation. And like I said, I think that I know I get desensitized sometimes to, just the onslaught of bad news and, how right wing and horrible the U.S. government is. And this is just something that, anyway, kind of pierced that veil for me. So here's a video from Reuters. Apparently, Donald Trump is planning to wind down the coronavirus task force as they just shift into reopening the country. And Trump here even acknowledges that it will impact some people very badly, meaning they will die. Let's watch.
They'll have something in a different form.
President Donald Trump said on Tuesday that he will soon wind down the White House coronavirus task force, possibly before the end of the month, as the number of coronavirus fatalities in the U.S. crossed 70,000, the highest death toll in the world.
Mike Pence and the task force have done a great job, but we're now looking at a little bit of a different form, and that form is safety and opening, and we'll have a different group probably set up for that.
Are you saying mission accomplished?
No, not at all. The mission accomplishes when it's over.
On his first trip out of Washington in weeks, Trump toured a factory in Phoenix, Arizona that makes N95 masks, opting to go without wearing one as Guns N' Roses' cover of Live and Let Die blared in the background. Vice President Mike Pence drew heavy criticism for not wearing a mask during a recent trip to Minnesota's Mayo Clinic. He later apologized for it. Trump has been unable to hold rallies in an election year amid the coronavirus pandemic, and the president seemed happy to be back in campaign mode and out of the White House, as he pressed for states to reopen, even as cases and deaths mount by the day.
We can't keep it closed. I mean, I've had doctors say, well, why don't we close it for a couple of years? This is the United States of America. And you know what? The people of our country are warriors, and I'm looking at it. I'm not saying anything is perfect. And yes, will some people be affected? Yes. Will some people be affected badly? Yes. But we have to get our country open, and we have to get it open soon.
Trump's trip to Arizona, which is partially reopening this week, comes as dozens of U.S. states such as Texas, Florida, Georgia, and other southern states are leading the way in loosening restrictions on businesses. Restaurants, retail stores, and malls in Texas are now allowed to open at 25% capacity in most areas. Stores in rural counties with 5 or fewer cases of coronavirus can operate at 50%. This week, researchers at the University of Washington's Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation almost doubled their previous estimate for U.S. coronavirus deaths to nearly 135,000 by August. The institute said the revision reflected, quote, rising mobility in most U.S. states, with an easing of business closures and stay-at-home orders expected in 31 states by next week. On Monday, the New York Times reported that an internal government document projects a surge in coronavirus cases and a sharp rise in daily deaths by June 1st. The White House said the document had not gone through interagency vetting.
Okay, so let's take a look at this chart here. Projected deaths per day, which, apparently this is the leaked version that hasn't been thoroughly vetted. Do you want that to be you? Do you want that to be you on that curve? Do you want to die for the Dow? Because if not, we have got to get together with our locals and start making news. What do I mean by this? Start to stage protests counter to the message of the reopen protests. Start lobbying the government to pay people more. I know that there have been some actions to this effect. We need to do it more. Those reopen protests, and I have posted a few articles to this effect. I believe there was one from Forbes and one from Business Insider about how the right-wing reopen protests, which are all about petty bourgeois convenience, as well as the very real fact of their small businesses can't afford to stay closed. This is an unfortunate fact of capitalism. So maybe these people shouldn't have spent the last few decades promoting and defending a system that one day would claim their business, but here we fucking are. Anyway, it boggles the mind. But anyway, they've been having their protests. They're well funded by the Koch brothers and other right-wing billionaire interests. We've got to get out there and start staging protests of our own. Let's discuss that on the page in the comments, but we need to do it. So on the note of the reopen protests and the right-wing extremists who are there, here are two headlines from today's Democracy Now! That's May 6th, Democracy Now! Here we go.
In Flint, Michigan, prosecutors have charged 3 people in the shooting death of a security guard who reportedly told a customer to wear a face mask as required by law. 43-year-old Calvin Munerlin was shot in the head Friday after a verbal altercation in which he demanded shoppers at a Family Dollar store cover their faces to stop the spread of coronavirus. In Colorado, the FBI says it arrested a 53-year-old anti-lockdown protester after finding 4 pipe bombs in his home. Before his arrest, Bradley Bunn was spotted carrying firearms at the Colorado State Capitol in Denver as he ignored social distancing guidelines to join protests against remain-at-home orders.
So there you have it. We got a Dollar Tree or Family Dollar, whatever it is, greeter basically being shot in the face for telling people to wear a mask or else they can't come into the store. This is, taken as by people totally entitled. I mean, there's a huge cultural problem in the United States. But, people who just, I'm going to do what I want, not wear a mask, even though there's a lethal virus going around and we don't know who's vulnerable and we don't know who's carrying it and everything. And they shoot the guy in the face, all that for that worker for what, like $9 an hour, $10 an hour. And then, of course, the second guy, apparently had been to the, armed protest rallies at the state capitol at least once, and then is arrested with pipe bombs in his house. Was this guy another right-wing time bomb waiting to go off? So, again, we have those stories that these are being funded and promoted by counter-revolutionary billionaire, elite 0.01% interests. And then along the same lines, we have another video from Reuters about a whistleblower in the Trump campaign who was fired for raising concerns about coronavirus a few months ago. Here's the video.
An ousted U.S. health expert filed a whistleblower's complaint on Tuesday, accusing the Trump administration of downplaying the coronavirus threat and retaliating by ousting him when he raised concerns. Rick Bright said in the complaint that he warned about the virus in January, but that he was met with hostility from Secretary of Health and Human Services Alex Azar and other top officials. Bright is an expert in vaccines and therapeutics, and before his ouster, he was director of the agency under HHS responsible for developing drugs to fight COVID-19. He assumed the post in 2016 before Trump had taken office. Last month, HHS said Bright was moved to a new position under the National Institutes of Health. In a statement, Bright said he was reassigned, in part because he resisted efforts to push hydroxychloroquine and other anti-malaria drugs as potential cures for COVID-19. He added that the Trump administration has promoted the medicines, even though they, quote, clearly lack scientific merit. And when asked about Bright's removal last month, Trump said he knew nothing about him.
He was retaliated against because he refused
That
to promote
I don't know.
hydroxychloroquine.
Again, I don't know anything about it.
Did you ever ask a
I don't know.
scientist to
Easy,
promote it?
easy. Just take it nice and easy. I don't know anything about him. Until yesterday, I never heard of the gentleman.
Bright's lawyers argue that his removal from his former post violated a federal law protecting government whistleblowers. An HHS spokeswoman did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Bright's complaint also requests he be reinstated and calls for a full investigation. It also says his tensions with HHS leadership date back to before the coronavirus, and that since 2017, he has been protesting, quote, cronyism and award of contracts to companies with political connections to the administration. Democrats and some Republicans have also criticized Trump for playing down the virus threat. The U.S. coronavirus death toll is now the world's highest.
So how much more of this are we going to tolerate? That was the thought I woke up with this morning. You know, how many children, friends, relatives, loved ones are we going to allow to be put in harm's way due to right-wing interests promoting reopening rather than paying people to stay home as the solution? I mean, the weather's warming up. We're into May. Tourism is going to be kicking into full gear. There's going to be more and more travel over the coming months. And they're predicting a massive second round because of not taking it seriously for the sake of the economy. The economy, of course, is an abstraction. They can print the money. They can do whatever. I mean, capitalism cannot manage this pandemic. That's what we're seeing, is that just as Marx said that feudalism led to capitalism, capitalism eventually overthrew feudalism because feudalism could no longer manage the emerging conditions that it had created. The same thing is happening now. Capitalism can no longer manage the complex, rich, diverse, multifaceted, and ever-changing world that it has created. We need socialism. We need an economy that is democratically controlled. We need industrial democracy, economic democracy, so that when a virus hits, it's not just sheer barbarism and like fend for yourselves and people are, fighting over scraps of meat in the streets or whatever. That we can't just put people's lives in danger for the sake of somebody's worth $3 million. They're fucking little restaurant or whatever. It's just this isn't the system that we want or need. It can't cope. And the United States has the highest death toll, largely due to these structural factors and the encouragement from the highest levels of the right-wing government to totally ignore any kind of public health or medical reality, biological reality that's going on right now as far as safety around this virus. And then, of course, there are also the cultural factors and just the fear. I mean, I think there's a profound fear and ignorance. People are just angry about all the wrong things. They're totally confused. They're not class conscious. And so they're going out, the government can't tell me what to do. Well, which is it? I actually posted another meme just recently that was, Trump saying, oh, the virus isn't serious. We don't need to do anything about it. And then, MAGA people applauding. And then Trump saying, oh, it's a national emergency, which he did declare. And then they're saying, oh, what a genius. It's like no matter what Trump said, and then this whole warped thinking of like Trump's fighting the deep state and that Donald Trump is somehow like, speaking of appointments and officials, back to that whistleblower video, the guy who, Ratcliffe, who Trump is nominating as the head of intelligence, that guy has promoted QAnon stuff. It's the most twisted, backward, confused. I don't like to use the term conspiracy theory because there's a lot of valid conspiracies, counter-revolutions, and various things, but it's this nonsense line that Donald Trump somehow is fighting corruption within the globalists within the intelligence agencies. It's the most brain-dead take you could possibly have, but there's significant amounts of people out there who believe it. So anyway, before we wrap this up, one more video. This is a video, well, I'm playing it in part because I'm just, obviously the Democrats are an absolute loathsome pile of shit. I'm just feeling in a particularly anti-Trump mood today, and this commercial apparently drove Trump nuts. So I checked it out, and well, let's watch this ad, this anti-Trump ad that's been put out, and then we'll discuss.
There's mourning in America. Today, more than 60,000 Americans have died from a deadly virus Donald Trump ignored. With the economy in shambles, more than 26 million Americans are out of work, the worst economy in decades. Trump bailed out Wall Street, but not Main Street. This afternoon, millions of Americans will apply for unemployment, and with their savings run out, many are giving up hope. Millions worry that a loved one won't survive COVID-19. There's mourning in America, and under the leadership of Donald Trump, our country is weaker and sicker and poorer. And now, Americans are asking, if we have another 4 years like this, will there even be an America?
Paid for by the Lincoln Project, which is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Okay, so there's the ad. And who made that? It's a bunch of Republicans. Party of Lincoln. You've maybe heard this before somewhere. The Lincoln Project. That's a bunch of Republicans. Now, where is Joe Biden? The Democrats, if they had the slightest clue, if they even wanted to win, could easily slay Donald Trump. I mean, it wouldn't even be difficult, I don't think. But they're paid to lose by the same people that pay the Republicans to win. That's a sad fact. Joe Biden is not even trying. He's off fighting off sexual assault allegations, not very convincingly, from Tara Reade right now. There's a sad parade of loyalists and apologists lining up to defend Joe Biden. It's not looking good. Biden's promise to veto Medicare for all. The entire Democratic Party is a mess. Thus, we get this increasingly naked fascism from the Republican Party. And of course, the 1% that's behind both parties is just laughing all the way to the bank. Meanwhile, the Green Party, total side note, Jesse Ventura was talking last week about a possible run for the Green candidacy. I think that would have been excellent. The Green Party, not exactly a socialist party, but it's kind of like the Bernie platform plus. Plus, they don't take the 1% money, which is huge. Jesse Ventura has governing experience as governor of Minnesota. Obviously, don't take no shit from nobody kind of person. If you've ever watched this guy in interviews, I don't think it's an act. I think he actually can think on his feet. Probably would draw a tremendous amount of disaffected Trump voters away, would also cover the Bernie base, get a lot of independents out. I think that this would at least get the Greens to 5%, if not outright win the whole thing with the way that the Democratic Party is imploding. Democrats the standard loyal corporate right-wing Democrat that has been the standard for the party for the last 30 or so years it's just not a very broad coalition. It's not a very large voter base. The Republicans are, holding their party together with their weird coalition of like evangelicals and sleazebags and everything that they've got. The time is ripe. I mean, we spent a fair amount of time on this broadcast chastising Bernie Sanders for his total inaction at a time when there are just so many possibilities for a new kind of politics in the United States and not taking it. I don't know what the story is with Ventura. I think that would have been great, but obviously not a lot of great electoral prospects. So like I said earlier, get out there, grab 5 people, 10 people from your local, do a protest, make signs, make the message clear, extend the shutdown, pay workers to stay home. We need Medicare for all, etc. We need socialism. Capitalism cannot govern this crisis. And the United States is a standout example of how much capitalism, the more capitalism you have, the more coronavirus you have. The reopen protests made the news significantly. I mean, world news. We need left-wing protests to do the same thing, and we need those to turn into a movement, to turn into a revolution. On that note, this has been Socialism for All. Facebook.com/Socialism for All. Please remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment. All of that helps to boost this channel and boost this content. Also, thanks to our current patrons on Patreon, patreon.com/Socialism for All. You can support this channel for as little as $1 a month. I'm not independently wealthy, and I spend a fair amount of time on this channel, so those contributions are much appreciated. Thanks again for listening.